Mary is out of town, so I am acting as chair, I guess, today. So I'll call the meeting to order at 6:35. This is the ACSD School Board, Monday, January 10th. Calling the meeting to order. We'll start with introductions at the end of the table here.
Peter Conlon, Jim Malcolm,
Victoria Jenny,
Peter Burrows, Superintendent.
Jen Cedar, Noble, Amy McGlashan, Maggie Sanzali, Student Representative,
Barbara Wilson.
Logan Price, Business Manager.
Will Hatch, Technology Director.
And we have joining us on Zoom, top left,
Lorraine Morse.
and bottom left, Mary.
Sorry, I brought Tanya over by mistake here.
Mary Gill.
Hi, Mary. Bottom, Lindsay, are you there?
How do I use?
I am here. Hello, everyone.
Oh. And bottom right, Suzanne.
Suzanne Buck.
Hi, Suzanne. Can you hear us? Can you hear us all right for note-taking purposes?
I can hear you, but I'll let you know when I can't hear you.
All right, and Will, if you could just read off the participant or who's here remotely from the public, that would be great.
We have Bruce McIntyre, Dee Bertholf, Hugh McLaughlin, Isabel Doherty, Middlebury Community TV, Ruth Bernstein, and Tanya Scuteri.
Great, thank you. At this time, we will take public comment. There's currently no public live in the room, or dead, for that matter. We're not hiding bodies here. But if you are online and would like to make a public comment, please raise your Zoom hand and will bring you over. All right, I don't see any Zoom hands. Suzanne, for your information, Betty just joined us.
I caught that, thank you.
All right, if I could have a recommendation to approve the minutes of January 3rd. Barb?
oh, second.
Mary Heather, Barb first, Mary Heather seconded. Any comments, questions on the minute? Wow, let's take a moment to appreciate. Did you hear that silence, Suzanne?
I was thinking that maybe it was my hearing going, but I definitely appreciate silence. That means I must have done quite well last time. Thank you.
Good job, thank you. All right, all those in favor of approving the minutes of January 3rd, say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. And now for approval of the ACSD bills, hand it over to Chip.
There are no bills read since the last meeting, which was 1 week ago.
That's right. Okay, so I will hand it over to Peter for the report of the superintendent.
Great. Since last week, our main work has been focused on kind of changing guidelines of COVID. Last week we had planned for what we thought was going to be a pretty significant case count. We were able to keep all schools open. This week we continued along that trend as well. So really fortunate about how things are going. Last week I learned that the superintendent from Mill River, Dave Yount, who is the current president of GSA, is moving to the private sector starting on Friday. So I've been president-elect, so now I'm moving into, I was supposed to start in May, and I'm starting this week. And that started last week. So last week I was involved in a lot of state level conversation with the agency and with others just to learn more about what's happening We're expecting some more information today. You all knew that information came out on Friday, just a kind of a heads up email saying that things were changing. And response in the field. Haven't heard anything yet, so I expect that from our press conference, we'll get more specifics, and maybe there's going to be some communication to the field after the press conference tomorrow, articulating exactly, what the change will be and what close contact, they mentioned stopping close contact tracing. I had also heard that there may be some other form of doing that. So I think we're still kind of in a wait and see, and moving ahead once we get that information. Staffing levels have remained last week and today. Today was actually better than last Monday. So that's a positive. I don't, in hearing from other districts around us, there have been a lot of closures. You've probably heard about some of those. You can go onto, actually CAX has the school closure information. There's COVID status is a little box you check now. So you can go and see every day, these schools or districts, some districts are closing. Winooski's closed through Wednesday. Otter Valley closed last week. So it's been kind of happening throughout the state as folks are just trying to stay fully staffed, and sometimes it's staffing and sometimes it's student absences with the close contacts reaching over 50%. And your day you can't count a school day if you have under 50% student attendance.
I was afraid that's what the email was, that for tomorrow. Before I read the whole thing, I was like, oh, we're there, but I was glad that we weren't, so it's good news.
Yeah, I think I heard something about the testing being done in the school as well. Is that?
Yeah, so they're instead of the testing test to stay in the schools, the testing is moving to home. And so they're working on collecting information now. I received an email today from the state asking what our current inventory was of testing kits. So Kelly and her team will be, working with the state to figure that out and what that process looks like.
Because I know, on social media, I've seen a lot of parents like really frustrated trying to get tests, find kits to be tested, at home. And actually Kelly's been helping a lot tremendously. So that makes me a little nervous that we're going to be able to manage this,
Yeah. I assume, of course, that's gotten me in trouble before.
Me too, all the time.
My expectation is that the state is looking at this, and as they pivot from test to stay to provide these kits to home, that they're looking at what the current state inventory is and figuring that out. I mean, it's interesting because the Omicron is so different from Delta. And I think as a state, we seem to be in the transition, trying to understand the tools we used last time in the fall and in March 2020 aren't quite as effective right now. And so we're having to do a little bit of a pivot and shift to respond to the current conditions. You want to
Well, you had your hand up tilted there.
Peter, sorry, do you think that these changes, as we think they're going to be, is that going to relieve a significant burden or pressure on the school system? Or is it just sort of shifting it in a different way with different pressures elsewhere in the system?
I think it will, what I've heard, not as much from our nurses, but from other districts, is that people have been unable to keep up with line lists, which is what you do for contact tracing. They just have not been able to, with limited nursing and X number of cases, they have not been able to keep up. So I know that has been probably one of the reasons why some schools have had to either close or kind of shift practice in some way to make sure that they're following up on that. So that has been a significant tension point, I think, for schools. That I think what's happening now is from what I've heard from the Nursing Association is the spread is so quick, and how it spreads is different. that by the time information is getting about a close contact, it's not necessarily meaningful anymore. So that's part of that kind of shifting understanding of what kind of makes current.
Well, and that it's generally more mild, and so if people are experiencing a mild case, why are we jumping through all these hoops to make sure that people know?
Well, that's
You know, if it's
where,
already too late and it's mild, you know, everyone's just gonna get it and then we'll move on. Very good.
So, I guess my question has to do with any operational responses to this new situation. Have there been discussions, you know, with principals to talk about whether or not, like, lunch would look differently in the face of Omicron, and whether there's going to be operational changes at the school level to address this, you know, as just a way to try to, I mean, I know in some ways it's like trying to stop a wave, right? But
I think if you look at our school is only one portion of a student's lived reality or staff too.
Right.
I think when you look at the way schools, and I'm talking schools broadly across Vermont, are operating now, we're allowing volunteers in, we're allowing spectators to sporting events. So we're living in much larger group settings than we were previously with lower case counts. So I think there was conversation, I think there was conversation across the state as Omicron has hit. Do we go back to the beginning of the year when we, in 2021, where we had really kind of like lockdown procedures around lunch and all those things. And the feeling was, given what we understand now and current mitigation strategies, that wouldn't make an impact unless both schools and society as a whole shifted to a very different approach. And with the, you know, with how Omicron is spreading, I don't know how effective that would be. I mean, different countries are approaching it, I think, in different ways too. So it was talked about, but decided that given everything else in place, that people felt like with masking and other things that we were still, that it made sense to continue with current practice.
Okay.
And I didn't hear from any other regional partners, at least the Addison, Chittenden, Franklin counties, of people moving back to lunch in the classroom.
Right.
Meredith?
Yeah, I think, I feel like if at least the administration maybe communicated that to students a little more, it would be nice, because I think a lot of students, including myself, have just been kind of wondering, especially on top of all the, you know, academic stuff, there's been just a lot of cases. And so we've kind of been wondering whether anything's going to change. Obviously, none of us want anything to shut down, but I think maybe like if there was a little more communication about how things were going in terms of decisions on whether or not, you know, if there's been a decision to not change lunch, like why that is, because I know that a lot of us have a lot of questions about it, but it's just, we're just kind of speculating within ourselves at this point, like, oh, do you think school's gonna be canceled? Oh, do you think, because I know I'm hearing from my friends in different states, and a lot of their schools are just completely online, so it's just, I think a little more, yeah, exactly, I do not want that to happen. So, well, I just think, yeah, a little more, I don't know, communication with the student body would help a lot.
Yeah,
And I
that's
guess,
good point. I think just related to other states and other places too, our numbers are significantly, and especially here, I mean, we've been very lucky that our numbers have been very low compared to other places that are really like cases in a similar sized district with like triple or quadruple the number of cases. So we're part of it, I think, is our community and our focus on safety. I think we generally have you know, our community members are generally like really astute about masking and doing all the right things. We have a really high vaccination rate as well. So all those things, you know, equal lower case counts and being in a position we're in for we haven't had to close yet due to case counts. Not that that can't happen, but. And Dargis, maybe one thing to, that would be interesting would be to think about, like, at the high school, like what group could be, because you've got Kelly Lindbergh, our COVID coordinator, in your building, which is she's a great resource and would love to talk to students about kind of the thinking and the thought process. And she's also, she's president-elect of the Nurses Association in the state, so she has a lot of kind of background knowledge too.
Yeah, one of the things that's happening just medically is it's happening so fast, that to charge leaders who have to make decisions on lunch or whatever, on this sort of minute-to-minute type thing is really totally unfortunate. They're gonna have to make those decisions and these boards have to support them. Not that we haven't or won't, but I think that's a really important component of our collective deal too. We may have different feelings on it, but this is happening. This Omicron was, what's it, a month and a half old. So, I mean, you know, already in South Africa, it's falling off markedly, and we're hoping that happens in Britain and here, and that's our hope. But I think, you know, we as community leaders, if that's what we are, we have to be, I think, attuned to schools' problems in trying to come up with this. It really bothers me to hear about Chicago when the union basically fights the people that are trying to keep the schools open for whatever reason and shuts down millions or hundreds of thousands of children. I just find it, that's not that that's going to happen here, but I mean, that kind of stuff just is really disheartening. Because this is happening so fast. And it's going to happen fast the other way, and then we're not going to know how we react when they tell us we can go here without a mask, or we can eat lunch with somebody across the table. Some people are going to, oh, wait a minute, when? You know, how? It's going to happen.
Yeah. And, you know, school administrators aren't epidemiologists either.
No.
And, you know, I've been, you know, as I've worked through this process from my role, you know, I'm very clear that I need to rely on the experts, and that's why we stress state guidance and leaning on those that are charged with doing this work, that are professionals in the field. I am certainly armchair when it comes to deep knowledge about, you know, the medical realities of certain diseases. Yeah, so we're definitely, you know, and sometimes we like this and sometimes we don't. We're definitely tied to the state's approach and the state's perspective.
But I agree with Armstead. In fact, communication is really important, and because this is happening so fast, if there is a major change or not a major change, your job or Kelly's job or whatever is to make sure that we're sort of on, we and students and faculty are on board as to, okay, so why is this happening? Because it may have happened just because something changed the day before. I mean, nationally or statewide.
And just on that note, I do want to just express appreciation for the email that was sent out, kind of anticipating the change and notifying families, acknowledging that people are unsettled about this and feeling nervous about it, and even just that acknowledgement, I think, is really important.
Yeah.
So, I appreciate that.
I think, Dan, I just want to express that, like, really, like, the student body, I think, like, whatever needs to happen can happen, and I don't think there's going to be a lot of pushback, or that any administrator should worry about a lot of pushback from students, because honestly, myself, like, I'm not worried about, like, me catching COVID. Like, I know that I would probably be absolutely fine if I caught COVID. I'm worried about people who live with their grandparents or people who have, like, underlying conditions, and frankly, for me, that's, like, their safety is much more important. And so whatever, like, I think that feeling is also very widespread. So just whatever needs to happen can happen.
So I also wanted to mention that I read an incredible poem today.
Incredible what?
Poem.
No.
And I was hoping the author could read it. It was in Vermont Digger.
Oh, cool. Oh, wow.
Oh, an award-winning poem.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Would you do that?
Really? Nothing like the
Hearing from the author is much better than reading it in a paper.
Yeah,
Yeah.
be the bright spot in our day.
Okay, sure. So I wrote this about, it was for a climate change contest. And it's called Bluebird Song. I wish I hadn't been born in the age of extinction. I really don't think my origami heart is made for this. The list of things that disappeared into the folds long before I was 3, 4, 5. How many last ones am I throwing in the trash? How many last ones am I scraping on my tongue? Where are the last papyrus makers in Egypt? Where are the last speakers of my tongue? 2. You didn't know the spirits talk to me, but they do. You don't know there's a ghost following me, but there is. You asked me to define immigrant from a prompt in our English class, and I say someone who doesn't need an English class. You asked me to define broken in our English class, and I say my butchered mother tongue. Then we go read an article about a species we will never see, a type of bluebird that I can't remember the Latin name of. And that seems important, because if I don't remember the bluebird, then who does? If the Library of Alexandria hadn't been burned down, would I know another word for bluebirds now? If I didn't spend so much time thinking about dead and dusty things, would I know another word for lifetime now? Maybe the spirits know another word for bluebird, and that's why they keep showing up in the reflection of my bathroom mirror. 3, there are bones under the whole earth, and yet we wonder why we are cursed. We put bones into our cars and wonder why we can't breathe. We put bones under our strip malls and wonder why people disappear into the trees. You tell me back in Ohio, there was a golf course built on a Native American burial ground. I tell you that no one remembers what our traditional clothes look like now but my grandmother. I was not built for the age of extinction. I was not built for the age of colonization and degradation and burned out forests and dying languages and dying people and dying bluebirds. 4, I'm watching the birds drop out of the sky one by one by one. I'm watching the humans fall into the sea one by one by one. I wish the last dodo hadn't died long before I was born. I wish there weren't lists of beautiful things the light will never reflect off of again. My chest is filled with imaginary butterflies that disappear before they see the light of the sun. Our sky is filled with invisible poison that never seems to leave our lungs. 5, I wish I hadn't been born in the age of extinction. I wish these syllables didn't trip clumsily off my tongue. I wish the ghosts of dead things would stop haunting me in my sleep. I wish I didn't have a list of all the things I'll never see. I wish every tendril of smoke didn't remind me of this song. Another bluebird gone, another bluebird gone, another bluebird gone.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Thank you. Very well deserved.
All right, so you're good?
Good.
All right. Report of the board. I'm looking to Nicole for discussion around policy
I
D7
think-
special education.
Mary Gill probably can tee this up.
Mary Gill,
Yes,
the
Yes.
discussion around D7.
okay, yes. I don't know if Caitlin's in the room. I wasn't part of when the attendance was done, but Caitlin Steele brought this to the policy committee about 6 weeks ago or so, that this D7 policy that was rewritten by the VSBA, or I should say updated by the VSBA in October, is regarding special education, and that it is required by all the schools to have this policy. And we basically just took what the VSBA version and added just our own ACSD school district information. So this is a warning, and we hope to pass this at our next meeting. So it's just for you to look at and be ready for a vote in 2 weeks.
Great.
Just
Other
replace
questions?
anything?
Chip's wondering, does this replace something that's already in the books?
I think it does replace, is Nicole in the room?
Yes.
My understanding is it does not replace anything.
Okay.
It does not have.
It's new, yeah.
Okay,
Thank you.
Such a straight.
Any other questions? I mean, it's basically saying that you gotta go by the guidebook.
right.
That,
That would be important.
any other questions, comments for Mary or our administrators in the room? No. Okay, we will look to, pass that next meeting. All right, next on the docket, discussion around the budget book and fund balance. I'm looking at you, Logan.
Ready. I threw together a few slides, Will, if you don't mind bringing them up. It's gonna be an update on the budget, of course, mentioning any little tweaks that have happened since we last talked. Gonna highlight a possible tweak, one big possible change that might be coming. And then we'll get into the 3 action items. And of course, give opportunity for questions surrounding the budget book. So I wanted to, yeah, there you go. So the budget update, just mention a couple of tweaks. So when we last talked, let's see, when you guys got this information from Sharon on Friday, got the budget book from Sharon on Friday, we had already tweaked a little bit based on all the fine tuning related to putting in the health insurance. As you may remember, we had estimated a 10% health insurance increase, moved it to 5. And as we, like I said, did the fine tuning of bringing that through everybody, the expenditures went up slightly just as it's fine tuning, right? It was more like, all right, we're generally thinking this, and then it was very precise and it shifted the costs just a little bit. Just today, based on this announced tuition memo that we're going to talk about later, I adjusted the estimated tuition revenue based on this memo, assuming it gets passed, or not assuming it gets passed, just, hey, I use these numbers for the revenue budget for the moment, which actually increased revenue. The net effect of those two was like $16,000. So we're still right at the 5.2% ed spending increase that we were the last time I saw you guys. The revenue numbers for today aren't reflected in the budget book you received. So the little tweak of an increase to estimated tuition revenue, at Sharon's suggestion, we didn't reshare it. She said, you know what, they got it Friday. If we give them another copy and it's, she said, let's just leave it alone. I have copies of the changes. The point is, we're back to 5.2% increase, and it's other than that reflected in the document that you guys have access to.
And the one shift, which is the second part, maybe helpful to talk about now, is
Great.
The equalized pupil adjustment.
Great, so I can go right into that, no problem. So the equalized pupils, so at the suggestion of the Agency of Education, we were encouraged to resubmit it's called our census data, to determine it's, to share, maybe, I'm not gonna pretend to speak eloquently here about this. So we submit, this is my understanding, we submit data to the Agency of Education, and it's our average daily membership information, basically our enrollment is my understanding. And then from there, they do the weighting and end at our equalized pupils numbers. They had heard some feedback and had some concerns that the information they had was in fact incorrect. They encouraged school districts to resubmit that data. I had our data manager, Jasmine Doty, do that, and we resubmitted our data, and our average daily membership went up by 38.
It's another Christmas miracle.
Those aren't equalized pupils. That's
No,
just average.
I know that.
So, and her explanation for that was, and I just wrote down the quote from her email, because town districts of residents that were not updated and universal pre-K that were marked as excluded from state reports. So residency issues, pre-K that students that weren't included. The point is, that's what the resubmitted data showed. But like you said, good news. Now, equalized pupils, as Peter said, is weighted. So you certainly can't take 38 and just equate that straight to an increase of 38 equalized pupils. The other piece of that is equalized pupils is a 2-year average.
Right.
So to take the 38 and divide it by 2 gets you to 90. So you just take half of that 38 increase and it's a 2-year average. So that would be an increase of 19 prior to weighting. Now that the AOE has that data, they say they hope fairly quickly that they would then get information back to us with updated equalized pupils numbers. For now, we're sticking with the 1,711.66 equalized pupils. So that's what's reflected here, but it's certainly worth sharing that once they do their fairly quickly, mining of the data, if you will, it certainly stands to reason that our equalized pupils should go up.
Right.
As far as I can tell.
So in terms of what we're voting on tonight, we're approving the budget as is with the understanding that it may look slightly different come town meeting day.
Yeah, or before that.
Well, before that, the number has to
Well,
be
no, it's gonna
accurate
be-
in the
in-
warning.
Right.
Right.
This Article 2.
Equalized pupils affects tax rates. Our spending is our
Right.
spending.
You're-
So it's
Except it's part of the required warning language.
Yes,
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 that's what I
totally,
mean.
yeah.
Yes,
The only piece
Right.
that would have to.
I
So
guess I meant the warning, not the budget.
Article 2.
Suzanne,
And one
Do you have a
thing I was
question?
just
Oh.
gonna, just to add in terms of
So-
the process. Do you want to go?
So my question is, in the past, at least once, we were awarded some extra pupils, which then went into equalized pupil numbers, which then turned around to haunt us the next year or two later when they found out that they'd given us too much and we had to pay it back. So are we sure of these numbers? Just asking.
My own gut, and you don't do budgets by gut, but my feeling is that when I saw the equalized number for this year, it seemed a bit low to me. Whether, how close my gut feeling is to actual, I don't know, but I would trust that the number was low and that if they're telling us that upon review, it should be higher, then I would trust that. I was also going to mention in terms of our process working with towns, our hope is that we could get this information within the next 2 weeks because all of our town clerks are awaiting this budget to put into their local information. So the sooner we hear from the AOE, the better to get an accurate number that goes out to towns. If we don't get it by the 24th or so, I can't imagine we wouldn't have this for our annual meeting with updated information to share and with updated tax information, which is the key piece of this. That helps both our equalized cost per pupil, which is in the warning. It also will help the tax rates that we talk about at annual meeting.
yes, so the warning itself, the total costs, the total expenditures wouldn't change, of course, and we'll get to the warning, I'll bring it up here, but total expenditures wouldn't change, but the ed spending per pupil would go down, to your point. And I did some quick math surrounding this. So if in fact equalized pupils went up by 19, which is pre-weighting, it won't be exactly that, but ed spending per equalized pupil would go down about 1.1%, a little over $200 per pupil. The tax rates, the district-wide tax rate would go down by about 1.2 cents, 0.8%. So right now, so if you rounded to the nearest cent, it would go down from 1.56 to like 1.54, even though it's 1.2 cents. We're like 1.55 roughly, and it would go down to just under 1.54. So anyways, say it was a cent and a half, a little over a cent. Great. Anyway, great. Check, please.
when we were voting on a warning, though, the warning actually talks about that number of what the cost per pupil expense is.
Right.
So unless you have that equalized pupil number accurately, I don't know, how can we vote on the warning for that number? We don't have it yet.
Yeah, I think we have to vote on the warning with the understanding that,
I think there was this happened to us once before where we had a number and we expected that number to change and the board voted to approve that number pending updated information from the Agency of Education that more accurately depicts that number.
So that's how we're gonna vote it.
Because it's the second part of that warning, not the first part.
Yeah, I understand it. I'm just worried about the warning that we
Yeah.
are legally presenting the
Right.
right number. Even if we are looking, as you said, it's good news, all of it, so it's not gonna get worse, it's gonna get better. Better for all of us to pay taxes.
But
So
to
to
me,
speak.
the second part of the warning was inserted 4 or 5 years ago to provide more clarity to voters around what the board is really doing, which is approving the first number, which is the budget. And what had happened over many years was a lot of districts were hiding increases. They were losing 100 students this year and their budget went up 3%. And everyone said, wow, that's great. It's only going up 3%. But the tax implications were huge because they were losing 100 students. The revenue was falling out the bottom. So I think it stands, my feeling is it stands based on the board approving that budget number, which does not move. The other part is a descriptive piece that I think we could work into a motion.
That's perfectly all right with me. I'm just,
Yeah.
I understand that, but I just wanna make sure we don't get caught in any
Yeah.
way that is, data changes, we're not presenting the correct number to the public.
But you do run into a deadline where we,
Yeah.
you have it or you don't.
And what is that deadline? What would that be, Peter?
Which one?
Well, just in order to get the warning correct before town meeting day, and, I mean, or in order to get that warning correct before it kind of.
So it gets sent to
communicated
the
public.
towns around the 24th to go into their publications and information.
24th of January?
Yeah.
yes.
And then, I mean, the next kind of creation of information is for the annual meeting as well. So I mean, do you have any sense of how long?
No, they said fairly quickly. Now, this was late December, and they said fairly quickly, such as, or it didn't say the word such as, but it was, we're thinking by the end of the first week of January. Well, that's coming past.
Okay, so.
So fairly quickly by the end of the first week of January is what the email said.
It's all about the printing deadline, when you get things printed.
That's right.
Well, and even, look at what happened 2 years ago when we didn't get equalized pupil until May.
Right.
So we voted on a budget.
Right.
The board adopted a budget.
Right.
And that line was totally irrelevant. We just used, I think, the previous year's number, just as a placeholder.
Okay.
Yep.
I'm satisfied.
Okay,
Okay.
Keith, you got more for us?
Sure, well, I could have just had Will go to the next slide at this point. The next slide shows the actual warning. As you can see, well, you can't see, actually. The ed spending of, and then it's behind there you go, $20,192. So if equalized pupils went up by 19, that number would be $19,971.
The 19 feels a lot
I
better.
know.
I know,
Get
just
below
to
20.
sneak under 20 is nice, right?
It's still too high,
There we go.
but below 20.
Yes.
Never gonna get lower.
I got out of turn a little bit here because I was gonna move to the announced tuition next, and,
We might want to stay on the discussion and then move into
Yeah.
that's an action item.
Right.
yeah, no, exactly, yeah, so that's, wait, sorry, what are you suggesting? Are you suggesting going back to the slide one and staying where we were at there?
I was just, before. I think
Yeah, we're not
because
going
that's
to
an action
actual
item.
warning, it was in here, so we were talking a lot about it, so I was directing us to these numbers we were talking about.
Yeah,
can I ask a question about the numbers?
Yeah,
So we
please.
see it?
Yeah.
So the last number we had was 221081, so 2211. And this one is 2193. And so
Yes.
that's based on the couple of tweaks that you made, the fine tuning tweaks that you were talking about at the
Exactly,
beginning?
the health insurance and the tuition revenue.
Okay, so the health, I thought you were saying that the health insurance, we had estimated 10 and it went down to 5, but I thought you were saying that you actually had an increase?
Yeah, well, because that was an estimate. The 5% saying, all right, it was at 10, now it's at 5.
Yeah.
There was math done to say, all right, that's gonna reduce health insurance by this much. Putting it to all the people, it was discovered that 2 people didn't have health insurance budgeted to them.
Got it.
That are, the person who helps with it, personnel budgeting, said, yeah, I'm glad I went through this. I'm glad I looked one last time, because this person should have health insurance, two people
Yeah.
in particular.
Okay, got it. So the overall cost was reduced by a percentage, but once you went in and actually applied the actual amount to fine tune the cost.
Right,
you found
to
that
actually-
You had under budgeted.
To apply the actual change to all the people,
Yeah.
it was discovered, not only that person should have even had health insurance, much less it going from 10 to 5.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
So it was an oversight.
Great, that's okay. All right, so the overall cost, so you found some savings from the original that we see, and then we might also see some more changes moving forward. I just want to make sure that I'm caught up to where we are.
Yeah, that's right. And basically, through these iterations, things get looked at more closely, or things, oh, we changed an assumption, or we found an omission.
Okay.
Obviously, changing a revenue estimate, that's where the numbers keep sort of wiggling.
Okay.
It happens that they have offset conveniently.
Yeah.
In most parts, but yes, it's revisiting it, fine tuning it.
But this is it. So if the board adopts the budget this evening,
Okay,
we won't continue to go back in and change. This number is immutable.
that number there, not the number
Yeah,
we see
not
in our
number
book.
below, but the 41,578 is then becomes the number for next year.
Thanks, and kind of on the same line of making sure that I understand how we went from the 17th to where we are today. Oh, that's because it says the 17th. It's 2 weeks old. I'm gonna stop. Thank you. But I did want to say, Logan, for your first ever large school district budget work, very good job.
I appreciate you saying something. We'll wait until it actually passes. Just kidding.
Could I,
Yes, sure.
we had some discussion, not just about budget, but about how we report it. I don't know whether we talk about that now or not.
About the.
Yeah, the ESSER fund, reading over that component,
Right.
that was one of the issues. I thought this was it stated what positions, and in the footnotes, also, if the different schools, those are expressed too, I think, correct?
Yeah, I can think of one in particular that mentioned a couple of ESSER related positions that they've benefited from.
Okay.
I don't know.
I didn't.
Barb.
Yeah, so this afternoon, I was like trying to look at that closely. And, I like the table that you guys came up with, and put in with the other funds, like we do the other thing. But I wasn't sure when I looked at the detailed numbers, footnotes underneath each one, it was hard to know if that was ESSER or not included in there. Most of the time I thought it wasn't, just the way it was worded. And those were just normal, non-ESSER kinds of increases. So I think we might want to clean up the footnotes a little bit underneath the table. So it's all, like non-ESSER staffing changes or both, and we label them as such. Because I was having a hard time figuring out if it was or wasn't. You know what I'm saying?
I think so. We highlight the ESSER positions, but then when we talk about
on the individual school budget
Yeah.
pages,
Right,
there's all this like, change in FTE.
yeah, the notes there,
Yeah,
okay, yeah.
exactly. So we either need a note to say this doesn't include ESSER, or we include both of them, but keep them separate.
Yeah, to isolate, all right, here's a change in FTE, this is ESSER related, this
Right.
is not ESSER related.
Yes, exactly.
Fair enough.
That would be, help me anyway.
Yeah, throughout versus just there's a one ESSER section, it's
Yeah.
highlighted here, we're like, well, there's all the different departments in schools. Make sure it's consistent.
Yeah,
I had one other thing too, and it has to do with common level of appraisal. A lot of people will go right to that to look and see what their town's tax is gonna be. And even though I know what CLA is, I don't think in the paragraph it's ever defined, or at least the first time it's mentioned, it's stated as common level of appraisal CLA. So can you look at that to make sure that's the case? Because originally, I on my computer here, I can't find exactly the page that's on. I just thought it's important to at least have that first 3 letters defined as to what it is, because most of us don't know what that is.
Looks like it's on page 7, but it's not in that section down below, Chip. I think we could state it again.
Yeah, even on page 14, it spells it out, but not on the actual tax rate
Okay,
calculation.
maybe that's what was trying, I didn't read it all and see.
Well,
what's
no, I
all
get
there.
it, and like you
But I
said,
just, those things I think are important when in fact that's a really important
oh,
difference in each town.
oh, no,
It might be nice to have a glossary too of financial terms.
Well,
Actually, that's not a bad idea.
I don't think it's a bad idea, even financial or otherwise, because in this educational world, all of you talk in those, because it's a lot easier than saying the whole long thing. And if that's just something you can actually come up with, I
That
think that
report's
would.
gonna be twice as long as this one.
Those are appendices, they don't matter.
Dependency. Anyway, if that's practical to do, I think that's a good idea, honestly.
I think it's a great idea.
great.
Barb,
yeah, under wages, this is on page probably 19, and I downloaded it, so the pages might have changed a little bit. Under wages and benefits, we make a point of saying the projected increase for healthcare premiums is 5%. Under the wage piece, should we talk about the increases in salary that was agreed to? The, what, 4% or 4.1%?
Yeah.
Right.
4.1 and.
It was, it's a question. Since we highlight the healthcare in there, I was wondering if, this, we say that this also includes a 4% increase or whatever the magic number was in compensation, just to be consistent.
We have health insurance premiums in here on page 18.
I mean, see, most of the costs are contractual, fixed costs cannot be adjusted.
Right. In addition, healthcare insurance premiums are projected to
So
increase.
he doesn't give the number, but he's saying that,
Yeah,
basically the teacher salaries are contractually agreed upon.
as will be the healthcare. It was just adding maybe a little clarification there that makes it a little, just explaining why the wages went up.
Yeah, so we highlight the percentage change of health insurance, so highlight the percentage change of wages and benefits as well.
Just a thought.
Yeah, no, it's not my.
Of wages particularly.
Yeah,
wages.
because that's really the big one.
I'll do whatever is asked.
Go ahead, be careful if you say that. For this group.
are there other questions around the budget book?
I just have one note to make on the budget book. It's part of your notes on every school page. I think it's just a typo. It says fund transfers to fund service dash food service transfers centralized. I think you mean fund
Oh.
transfers to food service
Yeah, where is that? Or is
on
that
every
throughout?
school page.
Because it's probably, I put it in there and I just copy paste.
Yeah,
copy, paste.
exactly.
Oh.
And so like if it was just once, I probably would have let it slide, but I
Yeah.
don't think you want it
Food,
repeated.
fund, I mean, it's,
Yeah.
I'm kidding, I'm kidding.
Yeah.
Great, okay.
Is
Because
that,
the line on the table is fund transfers to food service. It's just
Right.
in your notes. There's
Okay,
just a typo there.
thank you.
No problem.
Which page is that on? Every single page.
We're still also, just to let everyone know, this is a draft, like,
Yeah.
we kind of like pushed to get this done for this meeting.
Yeah.
We're gonna continue to work and fine tune over the
Somebody
next
would've caught
2
it.
weeks. I think we would have caught that, but anyway, and I'm not devaluing you finding it, but just letting you know that we're gonna spend 2 more weeks on this before it goes out.
is there a benefit to discuss, because again, I read it all. But the idea of changing food service, because that does change, even though we're spending sort of the same, probably, we're doing it ourselves. So every school has a line that's moved out of food service into a different place. So should that be described, or is it described somewhere?
We did some of that last year.
And not every school was,
No, I know
Part
that.
of the
I'm only
change.
bringing it up because
I
I'm
think
not
that
saying we
happened
should
last
do
year
it.
when
Okay,
when we planned for Middlebury this year.
okay,
That's right.
yeah, okay.
I think we've crossed that.
We've
bridge.
crossed that, okay,
I think
that's
so.
fine if we've done that.
Yeah.
All right, so we're moving on to fund balance discussion? Or is that? We have new.
Victoria,
Yes, I'm sorry, Lorraine. Question?
I didn't know if it was all right. I had a couple of questions as I went through the book about some particular line items. Is it okay to ask about those now?
Sure.
One of the questions I had as I was reading through Tracy's narrative about Ripton, she had mentioned that they had 2 classes this year and next year they were going to 3 classes, but there was not going to be any additional staff. So I wondered how that was going to work, if they were adding an additional classroom, but not additional staff.
So this year they decided, given the student population and the staffing, that they wanted to try to have, instead of 3 classes, because they have 3 full-time elementary teachers. But they decided this year to try 2 classrooms with 1 teacher co-teaching with the other 2.
Okay. Okay. That question.
And this, for next year, they feel like a 3 classroom model works better.
Okay. Well, that makes sense. I just couldn't figure out where, if they didn't have the additional teacher, how they were going to do that. Another question I had, Peter, was under the board and district administration, the legal, and it's a small amount, obviously, legal 35,000 was budgeted this year and 35,000 again next year. And knowing that a lot of the legal, or a good amount of the legal was negotiations. And since we're not going to be negotiating next year, I didn't know why that number stayed the same, unless perhaps we went over the budgeted item this year. And so we kept it.
We've been keeping, that number has stayed fairly constant, budget to budget. We haven't made a significant increase in negotiations here, just because things, in my experience, things come up in a year outside of negotiations that could take a significant amount of funds that aren't related to negotiations, but are related to any number of legal issues that a district faces. And so I think we found over time that number has worked. We don't always hit it exactly, but that number has seemed like a good standard. It's certainly something we can look at into the future to do like a 10-year backwards longitudinal analysis to see how close we've come in those negotiations here. It's an interesting idea.
Yeah, well, I mean, again, it's not a huge amount, and I didn't know whether, and I know that legal things can happen anytime. So I just didn't know if that was a number you do keep, like at a general number from year to year, or you just said, well, let's, keep it at 35 or whatever. So, okay, that makes sense. I also wondered under the professional development and curriculum, And if this has been answered, maybe it has, I don't remember, but I know we often get questions from the public about IB costs, and dues and fees were listed at $100,870. And I wondered if that amount was primarily IB related, and if not, what those numbers do entail.
Yeah, so the fees number is our IB fees. So when people ask, like, what does it cost? You know, roughly it costs that fee per year.
Okay, so around 100,000 are the fees, due fees for.
Yep.
Okay. And this is a very small question, and I might have even asked this last year. I noticed under the field trips for all the elementary schools, they all have at least some amount of money. Even like Ripton has 300, but Weybridge doesn't have any, and they didn't have any last year. And I was just curious as to why that was.
So we still, I think in some of our elementary schools, we still have some local budget variation in terms of how things are paid for. So one school might have a line item in field trips that's 300, one might have, and these are historical. So one might have 600, but they use, like Weybridge, for example, might use the, you know, the Weybridge.
Friends of the Weavers.
Friends of Weybridge, thank you, I was gonna say Weybridge parent group. Friends of Weybridge has funded a lot of like field trips and other things. And so that's how they've done that. So that's something that I think at our elementary schools and in towns, we have kind of local sourced ways of doing some of these things. It is also something we've talked about, you know, as we were in year 5 of unification, going into year 5, that we want to start thinking about, you know, the equity question about who has access and how to give more access. So that's a question that is front and center in our strategic planning process, and the information that we're going to start gathering soon from our community about where are we, where do we need to focus our attention to move into the next 5-year period of time.
Okay, thank you. That was all my questions. Thank you very much.
Mary Gill.
Yes, I have 2 questions. One is regarding the preschool. I noticed that only 2 schools are now offering in-building preschool, Bridport and Mary Hogan. And that Mary Hogan's budget went down by 29.4%. I wonder why such a major decrease. And the second part of my question is, if we only have 2 buildings offering preschool, are we fulfilling the need for the amount of preschool that we need in our county? Seems to me there are many more children. I know that some of them go to registered daycare and they get some of their preschool experience through that. I just want to make sure we're fulfilling the need, considering we only have 2 buildings that are offering it, and then the Mary Hogan decrease in budget.
The fulfilling the need is a difficult question, because from everything we've heard from the field, at least, the real need has not been in the 3-4 area as much as it is birth to 3. So when we were in the process a few years ago of figuring out what we were going to do as a district, and doing that also in concert with the requirements of universal pre-K, which, you know, ostensibly privatizes pre-K in Vermont, because it's a kind of a stipended amount that everybody gets, which they can use at any private provider, assuming they pass the requirements to be part of that program. So we were told, as we were looking at, like, where do we go from the field, and I think Peter may have been at the meeting at Mary Johnson a few years ago.
I remember, yes.
Yeah. They were saying that, you know, the need, at least in Addison County or in our region, was not to develop more programs in schools, but to support private providers and creating a better connection between private and public. That's not to say that if you offered a pre-K program somewhere that you wouldn't have some students enroll in that program. And I think it's something that we've been talking about with Meg Baker, who is our preschool coordinator. And this year has taken on a role of helping us to look ahead and think about what is our vision moving forward. So I think at this, going into next year for this budget, given everything that's going on right now in the world and in locally, we're not at a place where we have a vision for this is the new model for ACSD going forward. I think we're still in a process of kind of determining what that is. There are cost implications. You know, the reason that we didn't continue a program at Ripton, for example, was we have not heard in terms of blended classrooms, a pre-K and a K is a challenging mix. It's what we've heard from the field. Caitlin might have more to say about this because she's kind of worked directly with pre-K.
Just that it falls under two different regulatory sets, so it has extra complications on top of any one set of regulations that you would follow. Plus, they're sort of philosophically a bit different in terms of their pedagogy.
Right.
It's a hard mix.
And so for that reason, and we had, I think, how many students were enrolled in the Ripton program? Like 3, 4?
Very few, very few.
So we couldn't, you know, we would need to hire essentially a full-time position for that. So we, you know, as of last year, we didn't have pre-K in this year's budget. Does that help?
It does. I guess I want to make sure that it stays as a critical need, as we're hearing regarding, you know, the need for parents to find adequate childcare in order to return to work or to, you know, to prepare their children for, you know, the rigors of regular elementary school. That we need to be advocating for better and more preschool and childcare. I know childcare and preschool are different, but they're often blended together as they are with the private model that you're talking about. And I want to make sure that it stays in front of our, you know, kind of our mission too as a school district, that we can't forget the younger ones. My other question is kind of a more minor, but also a concern. But in the library media budget, I noticed that there was a 45% decrease in library media at Bridport, and also a 25% drop in Ripton. I just wonder if that can be explained, why.
So Bridport is moving from a 0.4 to a 0.2 librarian.
Oh, it's a salary thing? It's a position?
Yeah, so
Okay.
Matthew shared that in the meeting, in the band room, in his presentation. That was one of the things they were putting forward, related to their schedule, related to the other things that they had students do that they felt like a 0.2 served their model going into next year.
Okay. And is it the same for Ripton?
It does not have a decrease in staffing.
Oh, okay.
The notes below the chart hopefully explain it, that it's just a lower salary replacement.
Okay. Yeah, I saw that for Cornwall, but I didn't see it for Ripton. Okay, thank you.
I do just want to revisit Mary Gill's question though about the pre-K, because I think, you know, our removal of pre-K staffing or pre-K programming at place does assume that there is capacity in a quality program, a private quality program locally. And is that the case? And are we, you know, always kind of keeping an eye on those spots to make sure that if things fill up, then, you know, how is that triggered where we might open up another program at a school if demand is
We're
there?
talking about maybe 7 kids or so that we're talking about. So
So we're really lucky to have Meg Baker in district. She was on the you know, early planning of universal pre-K and has been coordinating our universal pre-K program for longer than I've been here. And this year we hired her for that additional 0.5 to serve our in-district programs, and as Peter was saying, to help us vision forward. But to your question, Mary Heather, she watches those openings very closely, and we do occasionally have some pinch points where we don't have a placement for a child, and she advocates and put heads together. So I think that what we're not seeing is a demand for another program at this point, not that demand at that scale. What we're seeing is a need to problem solve and find placements for individual students who often arrive not at the beginning of the school year.
Right, I was gonna say, I've had conversations with Meg, and that's just exactly what she said. She said, in September, I'm confident that we can place every kid. It's when we get kids who come in December or March, whatever, and they need a spot pronto, that's where sort of the beauty of her network can help work something out, but that's where the challenge lies, not in sort of creating more space for everyday need.
Yeah, and Peter was spot on. I mean, I'm not an expert, but what I do hear is that the real need is in that early childhood, which doesn't fall under our banner. Those are the bigger gaps. So we don't think that we have the perfect model, but we also have a plan to develop a better model. Right. It just hasn't been this year's top priority.
Gee, I wonder why.
I'm sure Meg.
True.
Barb.
Yeah, just another question. Under decline fiscal 23 budget drivers, we talk about declining enrollment, and there's a lot of good information here. But I was wondering if, for the average reader, if we could say something, you know, I've looked back over the data for previous years and talk about, well, our elementary schools have kind of stabilized between 110 and, you know, maybe 120. And now we're seeing the effects of that rolling forward into the secondary. And that's why that's where we're seeing the major decline, right? I think going forward, unless something drastically changes at the elementary level. I think it would just help understanding, because when you say declining enrollment across the board, people get like hyper about it. I've done that myself. Because it's like, no, that's not true. You know, it's already kind of declined, stabilized, but now we're catching up still at the secondary level. And it says kind of, you know, I read that into what it said there.
You're talking about kind of semantically.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it might help a little bit, is what I'm thinking. Just the.
I want it to just go away.
Yes. That would be ideal. Wouldn't it?
that would be nice.
Great.
Great.
All right, anything else before we move on
I have
to
just a
fund balance?
very little minor question, but it was something I noticed at the very beginning of the report when you list administrative staff. And for me, it was just I guess a question. I noticed our director of communications
I was
is
just gonna
not on
say,
there.
I noticed that this morning when I looked at it.
Okay,
Yep.
I just wasn't sure if I like misunderstood her position.
She
as
looked
part of
at this
staff.
and I think she probably just took her name off.
Okay, well, it was just something I noticed.
She's
I
watching
noticed
right
it this
now.
morning.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yep.
I have a,
Peter.
because lots of wordsmithing that we might want to do, but if we do have suggestions upon reflection in the next week, should they go directly to you, Peter?
Sure.
Okay.
Okay, cool.
Yep. That's great.
Great. All right, Logan, move us forward here.
Great, and actually, well, would you go back to the previous slide just to keep us on our kind of, on our index up there, gloss, table of contents maybe? So we move on to the announced tuition memo and then to the warnings, which I believe matches the agenda. So the announced tuition memo.
Hold on.
Oh,
One
sorry.
second.
Yep.
Are you gonna give them information now and then go to action, or?
It's up
And
to fund
is there anything about the fund balance? I just,
Oh,
it's
right.
listed as the budget book and fund balance. Was there something we're
Right.
supposed to discuss on fund balance?
Sure. My understanding of the fund balance piece of this is as it relates to the possible warning of what to do with the unassigned fund balance from FY '21.
Okay, so we'll talk about when we get to the warning. Is that
I think that
makes
makes
sense?
sense.
Okay,
Yeah,
all
let's do it.
Yeah,
great?
Here.
okay. So then, yes, we can move on
Yep,
to the announced
proceed.
tuition memo, okay? It's a similar process that we've done in the last few years of using prior year's announced tuition and increasing it by some percentage, which is typically based on the consumer price index. I did notice an error. It's not using in the first sentence of the second paragraph. Typically, we use FY '21 announced tuition. It's FY '22 announced tuition. So it's prior year announced tuition. And the numbers in the memo are using FY '22's number. So the numbers are in fact accurate, but the year there should be FY '22, not FY '21.
And just to clarify to the board how this works, for example, when we have Hancock or Granville students or Rochester students coming, we share this information, we collect this tuition, and then if our number is off from the actual cost, we can bill back. So there's a process we go through. I'm not sure what the dates are, Logan might know, but I think it's in the spring where we contact the other districts and say, this was our estimate, didn't quite reach total cost, here's the new cost, and we recoup some of those funds.
And it's after we get allowable tuition as well. So this is our announced tuition, and then the state provides us allowable tuition, how much you're allowed to charge. And depending on the difference of those two numbers, we may have the ability to bill back, like Peter said.
Do we need a motion on the table and then discussion? Since we're taking action on this?
Well, we can continue discussion after making the motion, but just to have that happen, I will move to set the FY '23 ACSD tuition rate at $18,284 for elementary K6 and at $19,712 for secondary.
That's K6. Yeah. That's
Should we
another
change
thing.
it? Need to amend your motion, Mr. Conlon.
I'm sorry, what was the?
Oh, so,
Elementary should be K5.
okay.
Okay, so, I'm sorry, what I meant to say was set the FY '23 ACSD tuition rate at $18,284 for K8 students.
Elementary K through 5.
All right. Gotcha. All right. I always get confused whether middle school is secondary or elementary, but it is secondary.
Secondary.
So, yes, I'm just going to say for elementary students and 19,712 for secondary students.
Excellent. And a second for that motion, Amy. Great. And discussion, questions, comments? Thank you, Peter.
Tuition is made up of a number of things, and a number of things are not allowed to be included in that tuition number, which is what the state sort of regulates. And I don't think we've ever had the highest tuition, but we've usually been, I would say, in the top quarter in the state. Is that true?
Well, I have the, looking at the CVSA, so the region is Addison, Chittenden, Franklin. We're not the highest, as Northwest is the highest at 2596.
Wow.
We're second at, what's our number now? I think I don't remember.
19,712.
Okay, 19,712. Mount Abe is 19,873. Next is Winooski at 19,242. And then you've got a bunch in the 18s.
just for reference, that's all.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
Peter, are you looking at FY 22 numbers? Are you looking at current?
I'm looking
tuition?
at next year.
Oh, next year.
I'm just letting people know
Great.
kind of where our budget stands.
Maybe.
Yeah, I mean, just to add to that comment, Chip, it also, should be compared to what are people's, districts, per pupil, that you got per pupil spending, and we also are high in that category as well. I mean, I don't know how many are going over 20,000 this year, but probably not that many. And I am assuming that we have very rarely, if at all, ever had to return money to sending towns. Is that right?
Yeah, I can't
So
remember.
it's-
That's when we overestimate.
Right,
And then
exactly.
we have
So
to,
that we,
can overestimate up to 3%. I
Yeah.
think it is. So
but we rarely do.
I don't remember that happening.
Like that, yeah.
And that's strategic, you don't want to
Right.
shoot too high.
Betty?
Just a clarification, so when you said, tuition rate for elementary K through 6, did you have 6th grade in mind under elementary, or is that now?
It's a
Right,
typo.
that's what we were saying,
Yeah,
it's a
that's
typo.
where, I carried forward the motion. It didn't
Oh.
occur to me that, oh, right, I was thinking this was a state issue. K through 6 gets this tuition, 7 through 12 gets this tuition. It didn't occur to me that, oh, because we moved to 6th grade, now the 6th grade gets the secondary tuition rate. I missed that.
Any other questions, comments?
Yeah.
All right, so we have the motion on the table. Are we ready to vote on it? All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Great. Anyone opposed? Thank you. Terrific. We've got our 2022 announced tuition rate.
Okay.
Terrific.
Now, I admit at this point, I'm a little unclear on what happens next, because I see on here, there's the action item of adopt the budget, and then following it is the action item to adopt the warning. So I could use some help here of logistically, what exactly we're doing next.
So the adopting of the budget is basically for approving the budget. And then the next step is that we have to approve the warning.
Okay, so that's like a conceptual, like a language of, do we approve the budget?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
I was just curious.
So if I could have a motion to adopt the FY23 ACSD budget.
So moved.
Any question?
Who
Second?
just moved that?
Malcolm.
Yeah.
All right.
Is there a second?
Second.
Barb Wilson or Mary Gill?
Pick one.
Pick one. Any questions, comments? Peter?
Well, I just think it's important that we acknowledge a few things here with it. One being that our per pupil spending has now climbed over $20,000 per student. And that has a trickle down effect on taxpayers, and it's statewide, that's a pretty darn high number. I think that we should also acknowledge that this is probably not the year to propose major disruptive changes as we tried once again to sort of come back from the impact of the coronavirus pandemic. So while I find breaking that $20,000 mark something that deserves our attention in the future, I also understand that a lot of these costs are in areas that it's very important to spend money on, and therefore I feel very supportive of what we're doing.
Great, thank you. Mary Heather?
Just to dovetail on Peter's comment, I think it's similarly important to acknowledge that there's a good portion of that money that is being spent that is supported by federal relief monies, the ESSER monies. And so, it is over $20,000 per student spending, but supported by federal money. And certainly without that federal money, we would be looking at a very different local taxpayer scenario. So I think I think if you could just further clarifying the very specific circumstances we're in right now at this moment.
Thank you. Jen?
That's what I was gonna say.
Yeah, I actually kind of dove into that number. And actually, what really makes a difference on the spending per equalized pupil is the fact that we put $550,000 in from reserve in last year's budget. So we're kind of paying Peter now because of that. So that's one of the things that's really, one of the major things that caused that equalized pupil to look so much different from the previous year is because of the action that we took last year. And if you just look, and if you remove the ESSER funds from it, the budget went up like 2.2%, It's almost like the ESSER kind of confuses the numbers a little bit. I think when you see that $41 million number, but there's only 600 and some odd thousand of ESSER funds this year, and there was more last year. So it's, that reserve, and I remember people talking about it last year in the audience, how, the board anyway, saying, do we really put this $550,000 in here? And this is kind of what it does. We're seeing the impact of it.
Right.
Just more of a comment,
Yeah.
having.
No, I think we were at the time fully aware that this would be the scenario.
And that we wouldn't want to continue it for.
Right, and that we wouldn't want to.
As much as
continue it
it's
going
tempting
forward.
to, it's, yeah.
Any other questions? Anyone online? Question, comment? All right, so we have a motion on the table. Are we ready to vote on it? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those not in favor? All right. Unanimous. The budget passes.
Is adopted.
Adopted.
Adopted to present.
She has a lot of power.
Unanimously. Every single person. Yes, thank you.
So then we're on to the next action
Now
item.
we're on to the next action item.
Thank you, sorry, yeah. Adopt school district warning. So right as I start saying this, hopefully I didn't miss anything here, but I think there are two warnings in particular that we're discussing now.
Yep.
Now, those are the next two slides. You saw the one of them already. And this is just the language that's in the budget book that's going to be showing up on the wording. So it's quite long, but it's the wording of the voters authorizing the district to spend X dollars amount, which equates to X dollars per pupil, and notes the percentage increase of spending per pupil.
Now that we've approved the budget, we can't do anything about that.
Okay, so can I have a motion to approve the warning article number 2 as stated on screen? Amy? Sure. Yep. And a second? Mary Heather?
Do we need to add that caveat that the per equalized pupil might change? Based on like a final?
I wonder whether it's, as I think about it, I wonder whether it's just correcting the information when we get the correct information and not.
I don't think we can change a warning once we voted on it.
Okay.
I don't know how we
That's
can-
correct. Once you've approved a warning, you can't just change the numbers. You'd have to re-warn it and bring it to the board again.
Talk about changes, or new numbers.
So when's our next board?
I'm not sure
So our
because
next
the.
board meeting is on the 24th.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, this is before this actually has to go out.
Yeah.
Right.
So saying, let's vote on it with,
With the caveat that it'll be updated
yes, yes.
to,
Maybe update in the coming week.
Yeah.
Okay, so we need to go back. So let's have a motion, right? Or the motion on the table should be amended to say that we approve the warning in Article 2 pending new information forthcoming from the state around equalized pupil.
The first number is not going to change.
Correct,
Right.
right, so it's the estimated piece
The
of it.
impact, I mean, that really is just the impact. Yeah. And that's why I think it's not carrying the same weight.
No, the importance is we're voting on the full spending.
Yeah.
Right. Does that work for everyone? Okay. So all those in favor, the motion is stated, please say aye.
Aye.
Any? Trying to look over. I look over the edge of the screen.
There we go.
We can ask them to just sit up a little.
Put your chin up.
We're laughing because we couldn't see your, more than the top of your heads.
Right, we could only see the top of your heads and I was like trying to hear, anyway.
It was our fault, not yours.
Yeah, it's a Zoom joke.
Yeah, right.
Okay, where are we? So we've all voted, any nays? Or abstentions? No, all right. So warning of Article 2 passed with the, is adopted.
We've approved the
We've
one.
approved it. Oh my God. I'm sorry.
We need a glossary for this language.
Although the agenda says adopt. so-
It does, yeah, it does. Okay, so moving on to Article 3.
Great. Which is so the other warning discusses what to do with the unassigned fund balance from last year, from FY 21, the surplus is maybe one way you could term it. And the article here is to move that FY 21 unassigned fund balance to the capital reserve fund.
Okay, so can I have a motion to approve the warning article number 3 as stated? Chip, and a second. Mary Heather? Questions, comments?
We're not, sorry, we're not deciding at this point how we will spend this, because we're gonna do that in a subsequent meeting at some point, but we've already been, given information about a major project that's direly needed in the kitchen renovation, so a lot of this will go toward that. I would presume when we discuss it.
Great.
Yeah, and just a wordy thing, do we need to have what's in parentheses there? It just seems redundant. Estimated at.
Is it because we're saying we'll
Because
appropriate
it's
this
the full
much money,
amount?
we're estimating how much money we have, which we're estimating, putting the whole thing over, but
Yeah.
maybe because it's unaudited, it's not official, is that why that language is
That
there?
sounds right. If we put in how much we think is there,
Yeah.
you're saying this much is gonna move, but
Yeah.
this is our estimate of
So what if we
think
have
is gonna be
less?
there.
What if we have less when we do the audit?
That's why it says estimated.
Yeah.
But
I mean,
we're saying we're gonna appropriate the entire amount, so what if the
So
entire amount?
if the audit came up with a different number, this language, and I agree, it could probably be, I think this is the language we've used year after year.
I know, it's hard.
Yeah, I think it could be a little cleaner, probably, maybe for next year.
Yeah.
But this would cover us if that audit number shifted and they found an error, for
Okay.
example, which
I think-
has never happened in my experience, but.
Right.
I mean,
could
unless we
happen.
say, can we change it to say to appropriate all of the 2021 unassigned fund
And
balance,
then keep the
which is
principal
estimated at.
estimated. Yeah, I like that.
Yeah.
I like that.
I mean, that would-
I'm guessing that this is a legal matter.
I'm just
And then you
worried
have
about
to say
making
how
a
much
change
money
right
you're
now.
appropriating.
That's why I was
No
saying
idea
for
what
next
talking
year.
about.
Okay,
I
okay.
think so too.
I
No, that
I
makes
For
agree.
next year, I like.
I do
what Barbara
agree.
said.
And I understand why you've got two numbers there, because this demonstrates that we're appropriating all of it.
Right.
Yeah.
And also sometimes boards may choose to appropriate just a portion. and
Exactly.
Which we did last year.
We did last year, yeah. Okay, so we'll
You can live with it?
keep it as is, and we will remember moving forward to look at the language with more scrutiny. Okay, anyone online, questions, comments? Good. All right, so all those in favor, please say aye.
Okay.
I think everyone said aye. No nays? Any nays? Nope. All right, so the warning of Article 3 is adopted.
Sure.
And we can move on. All right. Other, does anyone have any other?
Well, before, we need to approve the warning for the,
The other two.
public information.
Oh, right, I'm sorry.
I don't see language for that one though. For
It's
the
there.
whole thing.
Separate. It's in the
It was
report.
in the,
Yeah.
So like, they have to read the whole thing, is whoever's gonna make this motion?
yep.
Not me.
I was gonna say, Jen, you just volunteered yourself.
Hey, just took her out of the running.
I'll take a shot at it. saying,
Okay, so we have a motion to.
Yeah, I move that we approve the warning for the virtual public information hearing as presented.
Oh,
Oh, God.
You could have done that.
and I'll second that.
Thank you.
Okay, any discussion, questions?
Looks like there's a virtual connection. Is it only virtual?
Yeah,
It's only virtual.
correct.
Is that what we did last year? I can't
This is
remember.
what we did last year.
Last year,
It's the
yeah.
carbon copy from last year.
Yeah.
All right, all those in favor? Are we ready or are we still reading?
I guess I'm just
That's a question. about
hearing this, that it's just
Yeah.
virtual. Are we in person, but the meeting's virtual? Are we all virtual?
Yeah, I guess it's.
Yeah, that's good.
This is
How are
news to
town
me.
meetings happening?
I don't know, I didn't read the article in the Eddie Indy.
Yeah.
Well, this is us saying it's going to be virtual.
Okay,
Yeah, I guess
and so we're agreeing that we want this to be virtual.
I think
think
given
total.
that we have no idea, it's pretty soon, we have no idea what the climate is gonna be, it makes sense to do that.
Okay,
Including board members.
all right, Governor, I ran into
Probably
Governor Douglas the
easier.
other day. He was asking about it. I can tell him now.
It is also easier just from the standpoint, this is during break,
Okay.
so it will be easier for some.
I'm in Florida.
Someone's gonna be in Florida, someone's gonna be, I mean,
Yeah.
I have a feeling that a lot of people won't be here, so I think it will be helpful from an access standpoint too.
Great.
And it normally, the break doesn't normally fall
Right.
on this
Right.
date.
All right, good to know.
Okay.
Just one little correction in the bottom sentence, at least in the one that's in board packet, says report in the FY '22 budget book will be
Yeah, good
available.
point.
Need to change it to 23.
Tricky fiscal years.
Oh, I have.
Yep.
Yours is updated?
Yeah, mine says 23.
I feel like
Oh, I
saw that and I fixed,
I think actually, so from the website, they're updated. I'm not sure if the board pack one is the
Okay.
same, is it?
Board
I
pack
printed
says
this from
22.
board pack.
I think
Yeah.
I talked to Sharon about that and we updated it, so I think that's what this copy is, so that will
Okay.
correct that.
Okay, so we have a motion on the table. Are we ready to
Has
vote?
anybody seconded it?
I seconded it.
You did, okay.
Any other questions? All right, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any nays? All right, we have a warning, a new warning on, I don't even know what this is. I'm sorry, on the virtual meeting, town hall meeting.
Yes.
Yes.
Not
Great.
town hall meeting, but.
Annual meeting, the virtual
Love the
annual
budget
meeting.
meeting.
Terrific. Okay, on to other. Any other?
Presuming there's no other.
There's no other? All right, this is very exciting. Then a motion to adjourn at 8:10, please.
One question,
Oh,
are
yes.
we meeting on the 24th?
Yes.
Well,
We are, okay.
yeah, we were
Yeah.
planning to.
All right, yeah, I just wanted to make sure.
The 20, we say?
The 24th is our next meeting.
Oh, January.
Yeah,
Yeah, sorry, I was already in February.
Yeah.
I usually take that Monday off before the annual meeting.
But we might
But we
need
can
to
decide that later.
We'll decide that at the next meeting.
Yeah.
Okay. Terrific. Motion to adjourn. Second, Barb. Great. Thank you.
Thank you.